So my phone rings on Monday, and who is it but the next guest here on the Rich Eisen Show, the director of both of these films, the director of Hoosiers and Rudy, David Anspaugh, here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, David?
Rich, it's an honor to be. I love your show. It's so exciting to be here. I just have to.
Yes, David.
I just have to tell you, I love your I guess you could call it a rant. The words that you had on Tuesday, I believe it was, because you spoke for so many of us.
Thank you for saying that.
And you're talking to somebody who's going to be turning 74 in September. So I've seen a lot of American history go down. I never in my lifetime dreamed that I would be witnessing what we're going through today. And it's funny because you mentioned on Tuesday, when you said to your audience, I don't know what you want to hear.
Right.
Do you want to talk sports? Do you want to, so in all due respect, my heart is there. And now we can get on with the Game of Thrones. Rudy is a scam. Who said that Notre Dame had the corner of the market?
Yes.
On moral equivalence? Oh, my God.
Yes. Yes, David. Yes, those are all questions I pose, David. Those are all questions I pose.
Welcome to the party, David.
How's that landing in Rudy country? How's that landing in Rudy country?
Well, look, Michigan, I love Michigan. I grew up in Indiana. That's where I live now. I went to Indiana University, and that's where I met the writer, Angelo Pizzo. And when we met, we sort of bonded over our love for movies. And speaking of 500, I love Graham Rahal, and one of my good friends, Oriol Servia, was his teammate for a couple of years, 2017, 2018, I think, maybe 2014. And his dad, they're great guys. I wish him really well, too. What was I talking about?
You were talking about you meeting Angelo Pizzo and how this is all landing in Rudy country.
Also, Michigan.
Yes.
Michigan was my first recruiting trip out when I was in high school as a quarterback, but I wasn't much bigger than Sean Astin, so they gave me a meal ticket and a game ticket and said, "Have a nice afternoon," and they took my halfback, who ended up going to Purdue.
So we could have had a movie about somebody who's half nothing, 100 pounds nothing. Could have called it David, huh? And then we could have had Bo. We could have had Bo up there, and everybody could have put their Michigan jerseys on the desk. Did that really happen, David?
Well, of course not, and you know that. But you know something? The other night, you got me going, because the other night I just Googled. I just said, how much of this blank is true? And I started putting in a list of sports movies.
Okay.
We Are Marshall, The Blind Side, Remember the Titans, blah, blah, blah. We come off like a Ken Burns documentary compared to most of those movies.
Oh, line of the day.
You throw it down.
All right.
No, I'm not joking. If you follow Rudy's timeline in that movie,
yes,
and of course we took dramatic license, of course. And by the way, speaking of the jersey scene,
yes,
you did see We Are Marshall, I'm assuming.
Yes,
you
I did. Mm-hmm.
And you remember when the player comes in and they're having the big president's board meeting or whatever, like 50 guys in a room, and he said, no, Marshall does need football. As a matter of fact, come here. And he takes him over to the window, and there's half the campus outside. Never happened. Absolutely did not happen. Now, that's in the spirit of the truth, because I'm sure the student body and all those people, their hearts were in it, and that was why the scene was written. And in truth, it was a group of defensive players that went not to Dan Devine, who was the head coach, but they went to Coach Ianto, who was the defensive coach, and asked that any one of them said, we'll give up our jersey so that Rudy, he should dress for one game, because Parseghian did promise him that. And he got a crap beat out of him every day for 2 years, going to those practices and never missed a practice. And they said he deserves it. So Angelo decided, in the spirit of the truth, that he really represented the feelings of most of the players on that team. Maybe not everybody, I don't know, but pretty much.
So what about the question of being carried off the field? David?
Well, of course he was carried off. Have you never seen the picture of? Hey, you guys, come on. I mean, Chris, Mike, help me out here.
We know. We are on your side,
today,
Dave. Don't worry. We are on your side.
No, I know you are. I'm just saying, maybe you can Google it or something.
Oh, no, we have it up.
We got it up on the screen.
We got it up.
Is the whole crowd chanting Rudy? Is there Charles Dutton slow clapping on the other side of the wall? David?
Well, if you're asking if that all happened, I will tell you this. The crowd did chant Rudy. And the only people on the day that Rudy played against Georgia Tech, the only people that knew, the student body knew about Rudy. And the cheerleaders started to chant, or maybe some of the guys on the bench or whatever. But it spread around the stadium. I've talked to people that were there that heard it. Now, what happened on the day that we shot it, I literally shot the entire footage of getting the, quote, money shots of, having Sean. We didn't have the money for CGI. I could have shot that at an empty stage. I could have shot it at a high school, out at Oaks Christian or something, and it would have looked like Notre Dame Stadium. But we didn't have that money. So I had to shoot Sean coming out of that tunnel against a real crowd, and I had to have him on the sideline with a real crowd behind him. I had him running on the field, making a tackle, and being carried off. So we rehearsed the choreography of those scenes for weeks after practice. We would go to our practice field, and it was literally like a ballet. My oldest daughter, who's a professional choreographer, contemporary dance choreographer, would have been very proud. But it was like a ballet because we shot it all in 7 minutes.
Oh, wow. David Anspaugh, director of Hoosiers and Rudy here on the Rich Eisen Show. And speaking of Rudy, you said getting the crap beaten out of him. Do you want to explain to me how what you told me on Monday, that Rudy has heard what I've had to say about this subject matter?
This is the best part.
This is so good.
I haven't told my guys about this, but please, I give you the floor. Is this true that Rudy, what I have said into this microphone has filtered in the direction of Mr. Rudiger?
We're directly to Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yes.
And it was very interesting. I have not talked to Rudy. Angelo has.
Okay.
And apparently Rudy was pretty incensed enough to go to his neighbor, Mike Tyson, and ask him if he would train him to get you in the ring to put you where you belong.
Hold on a second. Back the truck up. Hold on. So the real Rudy lives in Las Vegas next to Mike Tyson,
who he has apparently asked for
like training tips?
advice so he could come
he could. You know what? Rudy could. I heard this through Angelo.
What?
Angelo spoke to him, but it could have been. I know that Floyd Mayweather. It might have been Mayweather because Mayweather lived in his neighborhood.
Oh my gosh!
That's fantastic.
And by the way,
yes, David.
not in the movie. What was not in the movie is that when Rudy was at Holy Cross, and he was, trying to come off as a Notre Dame student, getting in the cheering section, painting helmets and all that. He also joined what they called, and I don't know if they do it today, but it was a campus-wide boxing tournament, and it was called the Bengal Bouts. And dudes, he won it as a Holy Cross student masquerading as a Notre Dame student. And he won. And we had it originally in the script, but we had to cut it out.
Well, now hearing about his ability to fight, and
you better
his desire
start
to
playing
fight,
nice with Rudy.
Boy, what a great film this is, David. I mean, now that you tell me the backstory, I mean, wow, it's quite a moving piece of cinema that you put together.
Well, you know something. When you talk about truth and reality in movies, especially in sports films, Angelo went to Milan, Indiana, to when he finally was going to sit down and write Hoosiers, and he interviewed all the players and people in town and coaches and everyone.
Right.
And he came back to L.A. and he said, "You know what? I can't do it. There is no movie here. I can't do it."
Come on.
I said, "Why?" He said nothing happened. He said, I asked every player, did y'all get along? Oh, yeah, we all got along. Was there any problem? Oh, one day Bobby Plump was late to practice, had to run some laps. That was about it. So he literally had to come back to L.A. and he said, okay, I've got to make this all up. And it's so funny because a lot of people think that Hoosiers is the Milan story. And it certainly was inspired by that. And I grew up playing high school basketball, not in the 50s, but in the 60s. And I wanted to make it as true to form as I possibly could, you know.
So, David, are you telling me, with me saying how much fake Rudy is, you're saying Hoosiers is like almost wholly made up? Even though that school did go from, even though the school did win, but in terms of Coach Dale and his backstory and who he is and the picket fence and Ollie and my team's on the floor, none of that happened? Is that what you're saying?
Only in Angelo Pizzo's mind, you know?
This is incredible. Wow. You are having a come-to-Jesus moment.
I told you I had a recruiting trip to Michigan, and I only had one other recruiting trip, and it was at Butler University.
Sure.
And it was an honor for me. I literally got to interview with Coach Tony Hinkle. And the funny thing, his office is in the field house where we shot the end of Hoosiers, and which I had seen for the first time on the final day of the Indiana high school basketball tournament. They every coach and seniors tickets to come see the final day of games. I'll never, ever forget walking into that place. It was walking into St. Peter's or something like that. I mean, I'd never seen it. It was like a cathedral. I mean, I got that feeling.
Sure.
And I would go back for years. I go back every year to the 500. Now I live here, but even when I was in L.A., you know, I had a string of 16, 17 years. I didn't miss a race. And every year I'd go back and I would go in there. My friend and I would sneak in and I'd go way up to the top of the building and I would sit in the corner. And I said, you know, if we ever make this movie, I've got to put a camera up here one day to just see the whole sweep of this place because people are so little. I mean, the play, you know, like Hackman says at the end, he says, it is big. And
that's right.
It was big. You know, it is big. Yeah.
That's a beautiful, I mean, so many beautiful scenes, David, where he tells the kids he loves them. I love you guys, that they buy into his system. And now he's come around too. And they're all one. And it's his time to call the final play. And the kids want Jimmy to take the shot, and he goes along with them, and they all win together. And come on, none of that happened.
I'll make it.
I don't think so. Rich, I don't think so. You know, you had Bill Bob on your show one day, didn't you?
Yes, couple times. Yes.
Yeah. Did you guys ever? You did talk about Hoosiers once, I think.
Of course,
right?
but David, I talk about Hoosiers all the time. It is a perfect movie. It is a beautiful film. The stories, every sports film needs a father-son story. The Dennis Hopper story with his son. What Gene Hackman does for these kids, it's amazing. His turnaround, his story. Jimmy Chitwood, the whole town wanting to run the coach out on the rail, but Jimmy makes the move. The scene you have. How many shots did he make in a row, free throws? And then when the coach tells him, I don't care if you don't play, he misses the free throw, David.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. Actually, I'm going to give away a couple secrets here, and which I think some people have figured out. Okay. But we cheated a little in that scene. Now, first of all, I've talked to a million people who said, wow, that was so awesome. You never cut away in that shot. I saw him make all those shots.
Right.
Well, I did cut away. I cut away twice. I cut to the ball going in, and I cut to Hackman, or I cut to maybe Jimmy once. But in reality, in the master take that I had in my cut of the film until the studio made me cut in those close-ups, he hit 15 in a row. And literally when he said, I don't care if you play or not, and walked away, he missed it. Dead on missed it. And not on purpose. I did not direct that. I mean, that all came from him.
It's amazing.
But here's part of the trickery again. You want to get into Game of Thrones or Alien or whatever. But we took it was kind of like Deflategate. It's Deflategate. we took a little air out of the ball.
Yeah, it did look flat.
We loosened the rim slightly.
Sure. I mean, okay. You got to help the process out a little bit. And what was Hackman like?
He had a pure shot, though, didn't he?
Oh,
seriously.
Sure did. Oh, did you have to twist Hackman's arm to do this, or what, David?
Oh boy, that's Rich. That's another show.
Really?
That was one of the most unpleasant experiences of my life, and I think Gene's performance was, I don't know, as close to perfection as one could get. I learned so much from him. That was my first feature film. I had done, Hill Street and St. Elsewhere and Miami Vice and all, but that was my first feature. And to work with someone of that stature, not to mention Barbara and Dennis and all, but Gene was in almost every scene in the movie. And Gene was a bit, let's just say, mildly disagreeable. It was not fun for him. I think, I'll tell you, this is really great. There's a scene in the montage when Hickory starts winning.
Yes.
And there's a shot of Dennis Hopper, and the camera's across the floor, and it's shooting toward the Hickory bench. And you see, and you got music going, and you see Hopper and Hackman sitting there, and you see Dennis kind of laugh and slap his leg. Mm-hmm. That was a reaction, and I didn't find this out until just a couple of years before Dennis passed. He finally told me. He said, "Don't you know what happened there?" He said, Hackman said to me, "Dennis, I hope you've invested well because we'll never work again after this film." He had no belief in that movie or me at the time. So it was tough, I think
my head is exploding. And so that you
literally, he said that, and now he admitted that when he travels and stuff, people, of course, Popeye, of course, in French Connection, he gets, or maybe Batman, but probably more than anything, it's Norman Dale, or people will yell, "I'll make it, Coach," or whatever. But he was brilliant, but he was really, really difficult, and part of it was my nerves too.
Sure.
I was trying to film a movie that I had been dreaming about for nearly 20 years. That Angelo and I were trying to make, and the whole thing was very surreal.
David, I'm telling you, it's a beautiful, beautiful. It is I do not stutter. And I've told you this when I met you in person, when I met you personally, I say to you, it is my number, like, I get this question all the time because of my profession. My favorite sports movie of all time. It's Hoosiers, period, end of story. And I am just so stunned that montage where Dennis Hopper's laughing and the shot is a reaction to an off-camera line that Hackman's saying that this movie is going to be the end of our careers.
It'll never work again.
Oh my God!
Unbelievable.
And Rudy is like a Ken Burns documentary compared to everything else, including my favorite movie of all time. I mean, I feel like I'm on a 10-game losing streak right now, but. Better for it.
Kyle Rudolph the other day, it was funny because you thought, "Oh man, I'm going to get him now," but he didn't. He said that every team. He said like we had Rudies on our team, other guys, and most every team does, a lot of them. But what he described, and this is where the air went out of your balloon, was that he said, "Well, these guys ended up getting scholarships or contributed to the team, were real players, and they kind of got overlooked or they didn't have enough scholarships. And these guys were genuine athletes. But Rudy was just like Charles Dutton said, he was 5 foot nothing, 100 nothing. He hung in with the best team for 2 years and he got a degree from Notre Dame. That's what made it so special, And everyone telling me and Angelo when we lived in Indiana that we were going to head west and our dream was to, somehow get involved in the film business and one day to make a movie based on Milan High School. And everyone laughed at it. I mean, literally everyone laughed us out of the room. We had a professor who told us that we had a better chance of, walking on the moon than ever achieving what we dreamed of. My father went through the same thing. So many people can identify that, whether it's scholastics or musicians or in business, whatever it is. And that's why so many people relate to the film.
No doubt. No question, David.
I love the Colts since December 28, 1956, when they beat the Giants. And I went out in the yard and started throwing the football. I wore number 19. And recently, in the past few years, Joey Unitas, his son, asked me to direct a movie about his dad. And it was one of the great honors of my life, but I had to explain to him that I can't do it. There's not a movie there. Because his dad was so talented and so good, he kind of got overlooked, and they finally discovered him. It's like the Rudies that Kyle was talking about. But, you know, Rudy was he achieved what he set out to do. He said, one day I'm going to walk out on this field, I'm going to Notre Dame, and everybody laughed at him, and he did it. And
you did it too. You and Angelo did it too. David, this has been an amazing conversation that was better than any of us could have hoped for or expected. And just to finish up, I just have to correct you. You know, the air will totally come out of my balloon the minute that Rudy Rudiger bites my earlobe off, because that's what his neighbor told him to do. So that is where I think that'll be the big finish. And then fade to black and scene.
Please say hello to Susie for me.
I will.
And
You're the best,
I miss LA, and my friends who are listening, I miss you all. And let's all be good and safe. And oh, by the way, can I just end with this one thing? I called my daughter to tell her what time I was going to be on the show today.
Yes.
And my grandson, who's 4 years old, gets on the phone, and he said he wants to talk to you. He said, I'm playing baseball, Papa D. And I said, oh, that's great. Where are you playing? On a baseball field. I said, oh, terrific. And he goes, and I'm Jackie Robinson. And I went, really? He goes, yeah. He was the first black player to play baseball, and he played in New York, but he doesn't play there anymore. I think they play in California.
Yeah.
But when Kareem said, where do you begin? Where does it start? And I said, where did you get that idea? Did your mom tell you? No. He said, I read it in a book. He had a book. And that made an impression on him. And, don't give up hope.
You're the man, David. Thanks for the call. Let's stay in touch. We'll chat soon. Thanks for the call today.
I appreciate it.
It's
Bye.
David Anspaugh. How great was that? Kind of puts a button on everything, doesn't it?
Oh.
I don't want to hear Rudy slander ever again.
I'm not watching it.
Ever again.
Oh, you're done, Rich.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.